Starting off this list at number 10. This story goes that a couple were at home just doing some household chores when something super strange happened to them. The husband went to open the front door to toss a dirty rug out of the house, and it was completely pitch black outside. The weird part is that it was 2 p.m. and from inside the house it looked like a regular sunny afternoon with light coming in from the windows. They said that suddenly outside the front door where it was dark, it's like the sun was a light bulb and it went on, then off again, and then on. They described it like the flickering a light bulb does right before it's burnt out. The wife asked the husband if he had seen that, and he replied, "Yes, what just happened?" They also said that there weren't any clouds out either, so it couldn't have been a cloud blocking the sky. Were they transported to some alternate reality for a second? I honestly have no explanation for what the pair witnessed. Moving on to number 9. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far. This story comes from a Reddit user called RunnerGirl2001. RunnerGirl was trying to get over an ex when their friend Maggie texted asking if they would be open to going on a date with a mutual friend named Audrey. RunnerGirl accepted and tried to talk with Audrey, but didn't really feel a strong connection and felt like maybe they just weren't meant to be. Shortly after this, more friends began texting RunnerGirl about Audrey, even though they didn't really want to keep seeing her. Later that day, RunnerGirl ended up zoning out in light traffic and was close to getting in a car accident. They were halfway into the intersection when they realized that they had run a red light, and at the moment they realized, they saw a car swerve to not hit them. RunnerGirl pulled over after this to process what just happened, and after this specific moment, RunnerGirl's friends never mentioned Audrey again. A few months later, Audrey began dating someone else in the friend group named Jake, so RunnerGirl assumed that this was why they stopped bringing up Audrey. A few months later, RunnerGirl ended up bringing up Audrey to Maggie and brings up how Maggie had tried to set them up. Maggie was super confused for saying, "No, we were trying to set Audrey up with Jake." When RunnerGirl went back to their text messages, they couldn't find any that mentioned Audrey at all. In the near-miss car accident, did RunnerGirl somehow end up jumping into another dimension? Moving on to number 8. One day a person, let's call them Taylor, was watching TV with their mom and brother while their sister and dad went out to run some errands. While they were watching TV, an ad for a show comes on the screen, and it was one of those veterinary shows. Taylor's brother immediately recognized the vet on screen as his old track and field coach. The brother knew that he was a vet, but didn't know that he was now on a TV show. Taylor had never met the coach before, but obviously thought this story was cool. Later, when Taylor's dad and sister returned home, Taylor went to tell their sister about the TV show mishap. Taylor's sister had also never met this track coach, and Taylor begins to tell the story and asks if she remembers the old coach who had a vet clinic. Taylor's sister replies, "The funny one with the mustache?" Taylor is confused since she's never met him, so asks how she would know he had a funny mustache. Taylor's sister replies and says that Taylor told her about the coach earlier that morning. This of course totally freaked Taylor out because they didn't know what the coach looked like that morning, and also they definitely do not remember having this conversation because why would anyone bring up their brother's old track coach without a reason? I'm not exactly sure what happened here, but something weird is definitely going on. Moving on to number 7. This story comes from a person who often commutes to a town around 3 hours away from the one that they live in. One day they were doing the 3-hour drive with their mom, and they got to this part that takes most of the drive, and it's an area with a lot of mountains and cliffs. They are in the passenger seat with their mom driving, and as they look out the side of the window over one of the cliffs, they see a small community that they had never seen before. This community looked nice and consisted of mostly bungalows, which is apparently not normal for the area. Both them and their mom were super confused as to how they had never seen this community before, but it gets even weirder. They never saw the community again. It just disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Did they accidentally drive into another dimension one day? Moving on to number 6. So one day, this person was driving to work on the same route that they took every single day. They worked the whole day through and got into their car to head back home on that same path. As they were driving, they started feeling super anxious and like on the verge of a panic attack. They kept driving, and then suddenly they see this huge power plant all lit up. They're super confused because they drive this road every single day. How could they possibly miss this glaringly obvious thing? Then their boyfriend calls and asks them to pick up McDonald's on the way home. No problem. problem, they go to the drive-thru. When they get to the window, they see an employee that they've never seen before, even though they're at the same McDonald's almost every single day because you've got to get those chicken nuggets. And this new employee is the only one there and says that they've been working there for around 2 months. They take the food and head home, and when they get there, they begin to tell the boyfriend about this strange power plant that they just saw. The boyfriend explains that the power plant has always been there, so he doesn't know what they're talking about. Now every day they drive past this power plant with no idea how it got there or how they had missed it, but they've also noticed a few other small differences in their life. Their dog doesn't know tricks it used to know, and their boyfriend pronounces some words differently than before. Maybe on their drive home they slipped into a new dimension. Moving on to number 5. This story starts when a person received a camera as an early birthday gift, but there was no SD card in the camera. When they got home, they threw an older SD card into the camera and began to see old pictures and videos that they had totally forgotten about. As they were scrolling through the pictures, they realized that one was a video of their mom with one of their old dogs who had passed away. This was obviously such a treat to see this video that they forgot even existed, and to be able to see their dog once again. They switched to another SD card to see if there were any more hidden gems that they had forgotten about, but unfortunately the other SD card didn't really contain much. When they switched back to the original SD card, they saw the thumbnail for the video with the dog. They selected it, but when it went to load, the screen just suddenly looked like it was cracked all over. They backed out of the thumbnail, and then the entire video just completely disappeared, as well as the fact that now the brand new camera screen was just all messed up. While looking through SD cards, did the camera somehow transport them into an alternate reality where that video was taken? I don't know. This whole situation is super weird. Moving on to number 4. This story comes from a person who works at a retirement home, so they have to get a weekly COVID test. The test takes place in a building farthest from the building that they actually work in, so they drove their car over to the test, parked their car on the lot, but left it running since the test was routine and super quick and easy. At the test, they saw a friend of theirs and offered them a ride back to the building that they worked in. The pair headed out to the lot and realized that their car was still running, but the doors were locked. They searched their pockets to make sure that they didn't have a key, but since the car was still running, this obviously wasn't possible, and there was no spare key for the car, so they ended up calling a locksmith to come and help them out. The pair waited inside the testing building until the locksmith arrived. When he got there, they went out to the car and realized it wasn't running anymore. They thought maybe it had run out of gas, or maybe the battery had died, but they felt like it hadn't been that long. The locksmith opened the car door, and when they reached in for the keys, they realized that they weren't in the ignition. This shocked them both because the car was definitely on earlier when they realized that they were locked out. They went to walk back into the testing center to look in there, and after taking a couple steps, they heard the keys jingle in their pocket. The same pockets that they had checked before. Where did these keys come from? Because they definitely weren't in there before, and now they have to pay a locksmith $200 for no reason. Coming in at number 3, this one is another dog story and starts off with a woman who we'll call Anna having her bi-weekly phone call with her mom just to catch up and see what's going on. Anna's mom unfortunately had to inform her that Anna's sister's dog named Honey had passed away. Anna was obviously super upset at this loss and called her sister to check in after hearing the news. Anna had tons of questions about where they were planning to bury the dog, as well as how her sister's son was doing with the loss. Anna told her boyfriend how upset she was about the loss of the dog, as they had a really strong bond. Flash forward a couple months and Anna is heading home for Thanksgiving. Her sister was heading out of town to spend the holiday with her in-laws, so she left her pets at the parents' house so that they could be watched over. As Anna walks into her parents' home, she sees Honey, healthy as can be, just sitting in the living room. Anna was of course overjoyed, but asked her mom why she had told her that Honey died. Anna's mom was super confused and said that that conversation never happened. After leaving her parents' house, Anna asked her boyfriend about it, and he said he was super glad that she brought it up because he also remembered the conversation. Did they somehow enter a world where Honey was still alive? While this would be such an amazing surprise, it would also be unbelievably creepy. In our number 2 spot today, this story comes from a guy who loves cars but had a weird moment about 15 years ago that he just couldn't get off of his mind. When he was in his early 20s, he loved to speed in cars and just wanted to go fast. His friend had a car that he really wanted to drive, and one day it just turned out to be his lucky day and his friend finally gave in. He hopped in the driver's seat with his friend who owned the car in the passenger seat and another buddy in the back, and off they went. They went to an empty freeway around 3 a.m. them and put the pedal to the metal. Once they hit around 135 miles per hour, they began to see a bunch of semi-trucks. There were basically 3 driving side by side, taking up all 3 of the lanes, and certainly not going as fast as our speed demon friend. He thought to himself that there was an on-ramp coming up and he would just use that as some extra room to pass, but unfortunately, as he approached the on-ramp, another semi was entering the freeway and occupying that 4th lane. With all 4 semis lined up, he was approaching too fast with no time to brake, so he closed his eyes and prepared for the worst. But then, nothing happened. He opened his eyes and the other guys in the car were just as confused as he was. Somehow they were now in front of all of the semis, but there was literally no room for them to have passed by. This was the end of his speeding career, as he was super spooked as to what possibly happened. Was this a real world glitch, or did he somehow enter a reality where he wasn't in an extremely dangerous and potentially fatal situation? And coming in at number 1. One day a guy gets a call from his neighbors asking him if he can help them move a mattress upstairs. They had a really great relationship with the neighbors, so he of course was willing to help. When he got there, they got the mattress all moved, and then the neighbors asked if he wouldn't mind helping with an armoire as well. No problem, he thought, as he began to help them move that one up the stairs as well. This is when things went awry. There were 11 stairs at the front, he was on the lower end carrying the armoire about 6 steps up, and his friend at the top lost a handle, and the whole thing came crashing down on him since he was at the bottom. He of course loses his balance and falls backwards towards the pavement, and this man actually remembers dying from this fall. The next thing he remembers though is waking up in his dining room with his phone ringing and his wife asking him if he's going to answer the phone. He's obviously super freaked out because he literally just died 2 seconds ago, but now he's here. When he answers the phone, it's his neighbor asking if he can help move a mattress up the stairs. He surprisingly goes over again to help, and when he gets there, he says that he can help with the mattress, but not with the armoire. His neighbor is shocked because he doesn't know how he would have possibly known about this. Did this guy have some sort of premonition, or did his death in one reality bring him into a different reality? Who knows, but I really hope he is taking advantage of his second chance at life.
Starting off this countdown, we have the parallel wedding. This story was posted on Reddit by the user Parallel Alt Girl, who went to a wedding in a parallel universe. So back in the day, she attended her aunt's wedding. The wedding was big and the theme of the wedding was dark blue, so all the bridesmaids were wearing blue dresses, and so was she. After the wedding, she took a little nap before the reception, but when she woke up, she was no longer in a blue dress. She was in a light orange one. So was everyone else. She didn't know how that was even possible. But even looking back at the wedding photos, she was photographed attending the wedding in an orange dress, along with all the other bridesmaids. So now she believes that she somehow woke up in another universe, one where everyone wore orange instead of blue to the wedding. In our 9th spot, we have the swapped selves. This story was posted on Reddit by the user someoneelse777. She believes that she swapped places with her parallel universe self. So story goes that she was out for a hike one day with her boyfriend. They were nearing the end of the hike when her boyfriend decided to climb a big rock formation. But she was too tired, so she continued to walk down the path to meet him at the other end. However, while walking, she got a bad feeling, thinking that something bad happened to her boyfriend. Then all of a sudden she was someone else. She went from thinking, what if my boyfriend gets hurt? I should rescue him, to I came here alone, who am I rescuing? So in one universe, she was out hiking with her boyfriend. In the other, she was out hiking alone. When she switched places, she noticed that her other self was a bit different. She was a bit taller, fitter, and felt more confident. She was also carrying a tent and supplies for a solo journey. Her boyfriend was not with her. Like what? That would freak me out. Just all of a sudden like, and you're someone else? But like, yourself, but then someone else, I don't know. Coming in at number 8, we have the castle. Posted on Reddit by the user John30859, he shared his experience visiting a parallel universe. But this one was actually quite magical. So story goes that John and his cousin were outside on the porch when 2 teenagers approached them and asked them if they wanted to see a castle. I mean, that has stranger danger written all over it. But the 2 boys were young and naive, so they followed them along a path in the woods. Little while later, they saw a huge, beautiful castle in the distance. They got so excited that they ran home to show their parents. But when they arrived home, his mom got mad and told them to stay inside for the rest of the night. Here's the thing. He claims that his mom is very strict. She's always checking in on them when they're playing outside, so she would have noticed if they left. On top of that, in the area he lives in, there are no castles or churches or anything else that could have been mistaken for a castle. But the boys both vividly remember seeing the castle, even now at 25 years old. So what happened? Well, other people replied to his post offering him two explanations. One is that they were taken to Peri, basically a parallel dimension that can only be reached by doors in hills, under lakes and wells, through hedges, etc. The next is that the teenagers were actually aliens in disguise that brought them into another dimension. Either way, they somehow got transported into a world that has a giant castle. Moving on at number 7, we have the third floor. This next story was posted on Reddit by the user FeiFei775. Back in 2015, he went to the hospital to visit his dad, who was a patient there. After spending some time with him, he left with his friend to go get some snacks. So they hopped on the elevator and went to the third floor where all the food was. But when the doors opened, they found that the whole area was completely deserted. The lights were flickering and the floor was trashed. Scared, they headed on back to the 5th floor where his dad's room was. Fast forward to a week later, they are back at the hospital. And turns out that his dad was, and had always been, on the 3rd floor, which was now cleaned up and in use. So he's convinced that he somehow took an elevator to a different universe. Coming in at number 6, we have jumping universes. So this story was posted on Reddit a month ago, but the user that posted the story deleted their account. I wonder why. Maybe they ended up in a different universe. Alright, so this individual wrote that every time they wake up from a sleep, they believe that they are in a different universe. The differences in each universe are small, but still you know that something is not quite right. Some people will act differently from day to day, or a location of objects will move ever so slightly. So they believe that every day they end up in a different universe. And a lot of people commented on this post claiming that they too have had similar experiences, where they fall asleep and then wake up and they're in a different universe. My only question is, how many universes are out there? We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the accident. Posted by the user UMAwake, they shared a story about the time that they were involved in an accident in one universe but not the other. So when she was younger, she was outside watching her uncle do wheelies on his 4-wheeler. Eventually she hopped on to have some fun, but sadly the 4-wheeler flipped. All she remembers is it getting very quiet and then waking up on the couch inside the house. She went outside to find her family helping her cousin and uncle get out from under the 4-wheeler, but she vividly remembers being the one on the vehicle that flipped. Coming in at number 4, we have the breakfast place. Posted on Reddit by the user TexasKSMO, she shares a story about the time her and her husband visited a restaurant in a parallel universe. So to begin, the couple bought a little country house which they go to on the weekends. One weekend while traveling there, they decided to stop and have breakfast at a restaurant they had never seen before. They entered and a man in a cowboy hat said, "You can just seat yourself." I feel like that's what he sounded like if he had a cowboy hat on. So they ended up having a nice meal and wanted to return a couple weeks later. However, when they went back to try and find the same restaurant, it was gone. Instead, in place of the restaurant was an old boarded up abandoned building. The building looked the same, but was completely deserted. Dun, dun, dun. I wonder how food tastes though in another universe. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse. Maybe they have new food that we don't have in this universe. Who knows? In our 3rd spot, we have the workday. This story was posted 4 years ago on Reddit, but sadly the account is now deleted, so I can't give them credit. So according to this post, it was September 11th, 2015, and the guy was headed to his job of 5 years. But when he got there, he said that something fell off. In fact, he saw employees that he had never even seen before. He ended up striking a conversation with one of them and mentioned how it was September 11th and how it was sad what happened on that day. But the employee had no clue what he was talking about. The guy explained it, But the employee was all like, what attacks? That never happened. Then on his way home, he was listening to the radio and it mentioned Howard Dean as president. Obviously, this freaked the guy out, so as soon as he got home, he decided to just lay down and relax. He ended up falling asleep, and when he woke up, he was back in his normal universe. Honestly, I think it would be super scary to get trapped in a universe that isn't yours. Like, you'd be telling stories and people would be like, what are you talking about, you little crazy person? Like, no one would believe you. You'd be by yourself. Sad. Coming in at number 2, we have The Assignment. 3 Acid Nirvana on Reddit shared his experience about traveling to another universe, where something freaky happened to him at school. So in one of his courses, his teacher gave the class a massive research assignment. For the assignment, they had to use resources from a list the teacher supplied them with. So he ended up using this one book in the library to help him write the paper. About a week before the paper was due, he needed to go cite something from the book, but he already returned it to the library. So he went to the library and asked to get the book. Not only did the library not carry the book, but there was no such book ever written. Which is freaky, because how could he write a whole paper on a topic that he didn't know without any sources? So he must have traveled to a different universe, one where that book doesn't exist. And in our number 1 spot, we have Denny's. Ever wonder what food is like in an alternate universe? Well, they still got Denny's, I can tell you that. But it goes by another name there, Penny's. Yup. Reddit user is_emo posted a story about the time he ended up going to a place called Penny's, which was identical to Denny's. From the building to the food and the menu, everything was the same. Except it was called Penny's. He even asked his parents about it since he had been to that restaurant in that same location multiple times, but they said it has always been called Penny's. A couple weeks later, when passing by the restaurant, he noticed the sign "Turn back to Denny's." He asked his parents again and they said they have never even heard about Penny's. What's going on? Like, that would drive me insane. Does this happen to other restaurants too in other dimensions? Like, is Chick-fil-A called Flick-Chile? Thought-provoking question.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the story of Carol Chase McElhenney. One day in 2006, Carol was driving through San Bernardino, California on her way to Paris, California, where she was going to stay for a few days. On her travels, she saw a sign for Riverside, which was nearby, and she decided that since her family had roots there, maybe it was time to stop in for a visit. As she went into Riverside, she realized that everything looked different from how she remembered it, and was unable to find her old house that she grew up in. She tried to go to the street that her grandmother used to live on, but that one was different too. And when she tried to visit her grandparents' graves at the cemetery, the whole place didn't even exist. Even the people who were living in the town gave Carol a bad feeling, and she didn't even want to get out of her car. She decided she would just be better off continuing on her trip and left Riverside. Carol didn't end up returning to Riverside until a few years later, after her dad had passed and she was attending the funeral. To Carol's surprise, when she went to Riverside this time, everything was as she remembered it from her childhood. Carol believes that day that she ended up in some sort of parallel universe form of Riverside, and she even said that she felt like if she left her car that day, she was going to get stuck there. In our number 9 spot, we have this story from Peru. The Marcohuesi forest in Peru has been called a doorway to another dimension for centuries because of all the stone figures that resemble human faces and religious figures, and because of the amount of people who go missing and never get found. There was a group of friends who decided to enter the forest despite all of these stories, and they ended up stumbling upon a cabin that appeared to have some sort of party going on inside. As the group went up to the cabin, they saw people inside, but all of the people were in 17th century garb, and nothing that was modern or similar to what the group of friends was wearing. One of the friends began to try and enter the cabin and was halfway in the door when the friends quickly pulled her back. After being pulled out, it was discovered that the half of her body that had entered the cabin was now paralyzed. If her body really did become paralyzed because it had entered another dimension, that would definitely explain all of those strange stone statues. In our number 8 spot, we have the old story of the Green Children of Woolpit. In the 12th century, it is said that 2 children were discovered just outside of Woolpit, Great Britain, but what was so weird about them is that they had green skin. When the children were brought back into the city and given food and water, they refused to eat anything other than raw beans. Eventually, their green skin began to fade and turned into a more normal human color. One of the children passed away, but the girl continued to grow and eventually learned English. When she was finally able to communicate with those around her, she told the story of how her and her brother had come from a place that was in constant darkness called St. Martin's Land. Everyone from her town lived underground and everyone had the same green skin. The girl and her brother were wandering around one day when they came across a cave and they decided to enter. They kept walking and eventually came to Woolpit, and when they turned around, the cave they had been in disappeared. Did this cave act as a portal to an alternate reality for these kids? If so, I don't ever want to end up where they come from because it does not sound nice. Guys, before I continue on in this list, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out. In our number 7 spot today, we have the story of James Richards. In 2009, James was walking his dog when he tripped and knocked his head, rendering him unconscious. When he woke up, he found himself beside some sort of machine he didn't recognize, and there was another man named Jonas who said he had just found James' body while he was on a work trip for the interdimensional travel company that he worked for. What? The two ended up striking up some sort of conversation, I guess like you would when someone just casually tells you that they travel through dimensions for work. They started chatting about what pop culture was like in each of their dimensions, and they came to discover that, of course, the Beatles existed in both of their dimensions. Jonas ended up explaining that in his dimension, the Beatles were all still alive and they had never actually broken up. Jonas gave James a cassette tape of the Beatles music from his dimension that certainly does not exist in ours. When James returned to our universe, he ended up uploading the tape to a website called thebeatlesneverbroakeup.com. In our number 6 spot, we have a story from Reddit that was posted by the user 2humfolk. One day, the writer was driving home from school and began trying to call their boyfriend using the hands-free feature. The phone didn't end up ringing even after 5 separate attempts, so they turned the phone off and then on again and tried one more time. This time the boyfriend answered, but it didn't really sound like the person they knew and loved, and they also sounded like they were pretty freaked out. He said, "Liz, is this you?" Liz kept saying hello, but wasn't getting an answer, and panicked and hung up the phone. Liz tried calling again twice, but there was no ring again. Luckily, on the 3rd try, another voice picked up the phone and asked, "Is this better?" Liz then asked who this was, and the voice responded with something unintelligible, and then they hung up. Liz continued to call the boyfriend until he picked up the phone. Sounding significantly more like himself and not panicked at all, Liz asked who was picking up the phone earlier, and the boyfriend explained that no one had picked up the phone because he had never received any other calls. When Liz got home and checked the boyfriend's call log, they realized that only one call had gone through to his phone. Liz made sure that they were dialing the right number when they were calling, and it was the correct number every single time. Who had been answering the boyfriend's phone? At our number 5 spot and halfway mark, we have another Reddit post from Tiger King Quinton. The user explains that this story takes place when they were 8 years old in Florida with their family and their friend's family for a 2-week vacation. The friend really wanted to go to Wet n Wild and begged for his parents to take them there, so they ended up going one day during the trip. The boy and his dad ended up going into the wave pool that day and were mainly staying in the shallow area. After a while, a larger wave comes their way and it takes the boy underneath the water. He realizes he can't feel the bottom anymore and begins to panic, trying to break the surface of the water. When he reaches the top and gets his head out of the water, he realizes that he is no longer at Wet n Wild, but is in the middle of an ocean a couple hundred meters from an island. He doesn't know where or what this island is, but after a few seconds he begins to feel lightheaded and sinks back into the water. Luckily, he then feels some hands under his arms and he realizes his dad is lifting him out of the water back at Wet n Wild, asking him if he's alright. Maybe this wave pool really did take this kid to an alternate dimension. In our number 4 spot, we have a story coming from Tokyo in 1954. At the Haneda airport, a plane from Europe landed and dropped off its passengers. As the passengers made their way through customs, one man told the officials that he was just on a normal business trip that he made regularly. He spoke French as his first language, but could also speak Japanese and a few other languages. Officials then asked him where he was from, and his response is where things take a turn. He said he was from a place called Torrid, which was on the border between France and Spain. When officials told him that the place didn't exist, he gave them a passport that had been issued by this country that isn't real. This passport had also been stamped, validating all of the previous trips he had said he went on, including his previous trips to Japan. Officials called the company that he said he was meeting with, and the company said that they had never heard of him or his company before. They then called the hotel he said he had a reservation at, and the bank that was listed on his checkbook. The hotel said that there was no reservation for him, and the bank just didn't exist at all. Officials thought that maybe he was confused, so they showed him a map and pointed to the country of Andorra, asking him if this is what he meant. The man began to get upset, saying that Andorra didn't exist and that it had misplaced Torrid, where he claimed to be from. Customs decided to detain the man and put him in a hotel room for the night while they decided what to do next. The next day when they went to collect the man, he had totally disappeared with all of his personal identification and documents. Police searched for this missing man, but he was never found. Maybe this man somehow accidentally found himself in a parallel universe separate from his own, and I just hope he was able to make it back to wherever he was from and return to his normal life. In our number 3 spot, we have the story of a man named Jafar Vorin. Jafar was a strange man who just appeared in a village one day before he was picked up by authorities. The language he spoke was closest to German, but even then it wasn't quite the same. Jafar said he was from a place called Sakria and that he was searching for his brother who had been lost in a shipwreck. He couldn't point out where he was from, but was able to tell authorities some geographical information about where he had come from. He explained that his home had 5 separate compartments, or continents, called Sakria, Aflar, Aslar, and Uplar. He couldn't show anyone how he had arrived at the village, and he had no idea how to get home, so he just ended up living out the rest of his life in Berlin. It's crazy to think that maybe he was a man from another dimension and he ended up just getting stuck here. I feel bad for him, and I wish we could have helped him return home. In our number 2 spot, we have the story of Pedro Ramirez. Pedro was driving from a place called Seville to his home in Alcalá de Guadalajara on a November night in 1986. As he went around a curve in the road, he suddenly found himself on a 6-lane highway, and as he continued to drive straight, he saw tall buildings, unidentified structures, and grass that was 2 feet tall growing alongside the road. These were all things that were out of the ordinary for that area. He continued driving, and suddenly Pedro heard a voice that told him he had been transferred to another country in a different hemisphere. Pedro didn't know what to do, so he kept driving for another hour before stopping on the side of the road to take a look around. After a short break, he began driving again, only to come across a sign with 3 arrows pointing in different directions. One was labeled Malaga, the other was Sevilla, and the last was Alcabala. Pedro decided to take the Sevilla route, and after driving down it for a while, he stopped again. When he pulled over and got out of the car, he stood there for a second, and then when he looked back to his left, he saw he was standing right outside of his home. He tried to go back to where he had been before, but couldn't find anything that he had seen before, including the sign with the 3 arrows. Who knows where Pedro was for that while, but I'm very glad that he ended up making it home safely. In our number 1 spot today, we have the story of Lorena Garcia. One morning in 2008, Lorena woke up in a life that was similar to the one she was living when she went to sleep, but certainly not the same. At first it was just small things like her bed sheets and her pajamas, but when she got to work, things began to escalate. Lorena realized that her office wasn't her office and that she worked in the same building, but in a completely different department. She had never even met her boss before, so she knew that this couldn't have been a moment where she just got lost or confused. When she returned home after work that day, she was met by her ex-boyfriend, only to find out that he was apparently her current boyfriend. She tried to find the person that she had been dating for months, but he didn't seem to exist in this new life and world that she found herself in. Lorena began to seek psychiatric help because she was fearing that she was having some sort of nervous breakdown, but all tests revealed that she seemed to be of sound body and mind. The strange occurrences continued when Lorena asked her family how her sister was doing. Lorena knew that her sister had recently had shoulder surgery and wanted to check in, but when she asked her family, they were baffled by her claims and insisted that there was no surgery that had taken place on anyone in the family. Lorena couldn't find any answers to her situation and was having no luck with a medical explanation either. She is convinced that she went to sleep one night and woke up in a parallel universe that was altered slightly by small decisions that she had made. Honestly, after all of these stories, I kind of believe Lorena too.
Starting off at number 10 is nakrius clouds. This picture is taken in Jämtland, Sweden. You can see the nakrius clouds, and I know what you're thinking. These are fake. I mean, it looks like 60s psychedelic art transposed onto the sky. Some sort of oil spill on the clouds. It kinda looks like what you see when you rub your eyes too much. Like, it's all that trippiness. But really, no, these are clouds. They form up high in the atmosphere, about 30 kilometers up, so way higher than a bunch of other clouds, and they are also known as ice polar stratospheric clouds. There's a lot of science behind them, so just know that they're a real thing. But yeah, really, they do look like something you think you would see if you woke up one day in a parallel universe, and it's just the one thing that's off. You're like, nah, I'm just going about my day. It's chill, it's chill. And then you look up and you're like, whoa, dude, it's a lot. You know? Yeah. On to number 9, a blue McDonald's fries container. So yeah, sure, in this universe, McDonald's red and yellow. Those are its brand colors. And that's probably because there's been research that says the color red can stimulate appetite. I believe it, you know. And then also they have yellow because yellow is just really cute. I know it's gold for golden arches, but it's really yellow, let's be real. But these colors might not be the same in other universes. Like, take this fries container. Blue and yellow. It's just different. I feel calm. I still kind of want McDonald's fries, not gonna lie, because I always do. I don't know. But it turns out this picture was most likely taken in Israel because people caught that there's some Hebrew writing on the ketchup packets and on tray paper, so yes, it is in this universe, but just imagine there's a McDonald's out there that went blue and yellow instead. Just blue and yellow. Moving on to number 8, a spotted zebra. So zebras have stripes, right? I'm not remembering incorrectly. Yeah, I'm right. They have stripes. But apparently not all zebras. A zebra foal debuted with a dark coat and white polka dots. Over in Kenya's Masai Mara National Reserve, a foal debuted. He has been named Tira. In addition to being absolutely adorable, he is unique. So maybe a baby zebra from another universe where they have spots got confused and wandered over to this universe. And then a striped baby zebra from this one wandered over there to the polka dot world. It kind of sounds like a children's book to me, so write it and then send it my way. Thank you. But sadly, this zebra may not have such a happy ending. Without the signature stripes, Tira may get more bug bites, be easier prey to hunt, and all that. Unfortunately, predators can find it hard to target an individual in a group of zebras since they're like chasing a bunch of lines. But a polka dot zebra could be easier because it sticks out. But it looks cute. At least. Okay, moving on. Number 7, bougie 7-Eleven. Over in Chicago, one 7-Eleven is straying from the normal green, red, and orange. It's going gold. Like, look at this. Not only are all the letters all crisp and shiny, but the whole storefront is golden. The doors, the metal structure, everything. In an alternate universe, I need to know, is 7-Eleven like nice? Here, it's a corner store, gas station level, kind of like grab and go. Just all that. The coffee tastes as cheap as it is. The overpriced chips that I will still buy are there. And of course it has Slurpees. It's like a slushie, but it's a Slurpee. And that's what we have here. But in an alternate universe 7-Eleven, are there finer foods, like finger foods? Is there a to-go section that's like a buffet? Are there oysters? Is it the Roaring 20s there? Like, is it like glitz and glam? Is there gold all around? Is 7-Eleven different? Is it different where you are? I don't know. Number 6, green Elmo. So while hiking in Georgia, a Reddit user stumbled upon an old Elmo covered in moss. So the result is an Elmo that looks entirely green. An Elmo of nature, if you will. It kind of gives new meaning to Elmo's world. Like, no longer does Elmo's world mean, you know, the world he is living in. No, now Elmo's world means Elmo is the world. Either in the fact that he's literally a part of it, becoming it, moss encapsulating him, or the other way. There's an alternate universe where he is the planet, and it's inhabited by elbows. Because I could see that. Because I would watch that if it was a show, let's be real. Anyways, it really looks like this Elmo has seen some things. Like, look at the eyes. So maybe this alternate universe Elmo is more Five Nights at Freddy's than Sesame Street? Because Looks kinda creeped out if you ask me. On to another one of different colors, number 5, an albino moose. Or albino mooses? Let's think about it. So I've covered crawlers and cryptids before, and when you take a peek at this albino moose, just think about what it would look like at night when you can barely see. Just think about it. Okay, moving on. What these moose were spotted doing was crossing a road in northern Ontario. So albinism, which these moose have, is something that this universe most species can get. Melanin isn't produced and the skin and hair go white. And that's what's happening here. But do you think maybe there's an alternate universe where albinism is dominant? As in most everything is albino and rarity is colorful. Maybe there is a different world out there where 2 colorful brown moose are crossing the street and someone else is very confused about all this color because everyone there is albino. I don't know, maybe. Could be. But let's move on to number 4, a blonde sea lion. So no, this isn't a tempura shrimp. It is not a jumbo prawn. This is a black sea lion that evidently isn't black. His buddy is sitting there behind him like a hype man with just a little wink at the camera saying, yeah, look at my butt here. Cool fur, right? And then the blonde friend in the front is just like hitting a pose, waiting for the photo to be taken. The sea lion just knows they're special. They're flaunting it, they have a smile, they're waiting for a snack, they're just like, hello? They look like they're from a Sunshine universe, or the Lorax, one of the two. Either way, I feel like someone should Photoshop it as if it's on a plate of shrimp and then have a contest to see if people could spot the difference, because I couldn't. Adorable. But this is another lighter animal at number 3, an orange gator. So spotted in South Carolina, this orange gator might give Chester the cheetah a run for his money. He looks like he might be covered in Cheeto dust, or it might be dried clay. Who knows? So this gator is laying there with its little gator smile thinking it's camouflaged or something, but it's bright orange. Yet another animal from the bright and shiny alternate universe. Just like, are all reptiles warm-toned in that alternate universe? Are they warm-blooded? What is the story behind this gator? Is it too much self-tanner? Is it residual rust from a pipe it had a nap in? I don't know. But local news doesn't really know either for sure. So the last one seems to be closest from what I've read. There were 2 gators a week after this one appeared and they may have hibernated in an old pipe. No need to worry about the rust and what the hibernating in a pipe could do for their skin and all of their scales. They will shed off that entire layer and all that rust when they shed off their skin. So no worries. The gators are safe, because that's what we worry about with gators, their safety. On to number 2, no aces. So playing cards, they don't have ones, they have aces. It can be ace high or ace low, just no matter your preference, it's an ace, not a 1. But these cards don't play by those rules apparently and are insufferable to look at. They have 1s instead of aces, like you can't play poker with those. No Texas Hold'em, euchre, hearts, none of it. You could try and pretend they are aces, but we all know what is right and that is not the same, okay? What twisted parallel universe decided it was okay to come into our universe and plant the seeds of something that would tear down the playing card industry? No, I won't allow it. I want aces. That's all I'm saying. And yes, ace used to represent the side of the die with only 1 pip. It used to mean bad luck in Middle English. But culture has evolved so it now represents high quality. So I will not stand for this regression of our culture, okay? Okay, moving on from aces. I swear. At number 1, we have a whoa sign. So you may have heard of a stop sign or seen one. I mean, I assume you have. If you have a computer or phone to watch this on, you've most likely been in a car. Right, yeah. Anyways, what if a stop sign said something different? Introducing the whoa sign. This sign is saying, oh, whoa there, bud, you gotta stop right there. Just slow your roll. Roll to a stop, please. Whoa, buddy. Oh, whoa. And yes, whoa is also the command for an animal to stand still or just anyone to stand still, so it does make sense. But the fact it is used as a replacement for stop still seems funny. I feel infrastructure is always quite serious and formal, so to see something like whoa on a sign just seems kind of fun to me. I don't know. It catches you off guard, just a bit. So maybe in another universe that's the norm. All like, hit the whoa, then you may go. Gotta skeet before you vroom down the street. Gotta slow down before you ride around town.